Hello and welcome to Oakville Matters. Today we're going to take a look at the progress on the development of the old hospital site between Reynolds and Allen in southeast Oakville. And we're joined today by three participants of varying time and grade on the project. On my left here is Mark Simeoni, who's the Director of Planning for the town of Oakville for the last 2 years. And next is Janet Haslett-Theall, who's the president of the Joshua Creek Residents Association. And Janet goes back to the start of this project as a local community leader. And Peter deRosa, who's the president of the Trafalgar Chartwell Residents Association. And Peter, you've joined this in process as a leader, although as a resident, it seems to me you've been in TCRA forever. But Janet, why don't you let's lay the table by how this started as a coalition of 11 residents associations with a vision for 2 new community centers, and how did we get to, how did that start?
So the short version is JCRA was talking about a community hub for our area. What could we do, excuse me, for the ward? And in the process, the Parks and Rec Master Plan was being reviewed. And through that, we made connections with other residents associations across the south of Oakville. We had conversations about the needs in Ward 2 and around Oakville Arena. We had conversations about where could you put a community center that surrounded by a pool, knowing that Centennial Pool needed to be redeveloped. We reached across the table and had really good conversations, and council was incredibly supportive as we talked more and more about how they could, provide a place in the community for the different residential needs and importantly a multicultural need and a multi-generational need.
Okay. The first of those 2, the Trafalgar Park Community Center around the rebuilt Oakville Arena, will open next year.
Yep.
And to my shock and delight, it looks like we're on track to still open the Southeast Oakville Rec Center in 2020. Although it has had its challenges on the timing. We're demolishing the old hospital from the inside out, brick at a time, and there was quite an agony on council over, is that going to push us out of 2020? But staff thought that they could still make it. Peter, what do you think of progress so far?
The progress has been actually quite encouraging, and we see the timelines on track for 2020. Being a resident in the area, the demolition process, we see that it has started, but it's become very inconspicuous, if I may use the term. It's very well managed, but certainly it's on the way. And we look forward to the construction to start.
So Mark, as a planning director, you got to enter this show in the middle just 2 years ago. And what's your take on how we're doing?
I think you're doing well. I made the presentation this summer to council, and in trying to prepare for that, I kind of took a step back in time, and I saw the history of the site. The Oakville Hospital goes back, I believe, to about 1947, when there was a desire to create it. I think it opened in about 1950 or 51. But what it showed me was that it was a community that comes together to service itself and work with itself, and that means it has good conversations with itself. It has got conversations with council, and council has learned to listen. And if you look at the success of that hospital over time, fundraising, subsequent additions, it was always a community that came together and had conversations with itself in order to chart its way forward. And so when I looked at how complicated it was at one point this summer, I thought, well, the success lies in the community itself. Let's just make sure we have that conversation. And I think we did. I think council and the community came together and successfully talked through the issues and were able to chart a way forward. So I see that it's positive, and I see that it has a good future.
Well, I think in Oakville, we've always believed through the generations that we can have as good a community as we're willing to work together to create, and that's got to start with talking. When council saw 11 residents associations agree on an elaborate plan, that blew everybody's mind. It was like no council in Oakville's history has ever been willing to argue with that. So I think that was a really crucial piece of leadership, was to make that happen.
It's kind of fun too. When we put 11 of us standing at the podium together, it really felt like we needed to do that. We needed to do it for ourselves, but it was also fun to see the reaction of, there's 11 residents associations standing here. So yeah, I'm glad it worked.
Yeah. So let's delve into what's going to be in this rec center. We have a aerial view. It's like a cartoon drawing of what it's supposed to look like, and so this is the old hospital site, and the gray blocks at the bottom is the Wyndham long-term care facility, and it's not included in any of this. The small gray block is the old Oakville Trafalgar High School, about which more later. Now, to my eye, that's either light brown or pink, but I'm famous for not being good on colors, so I'll leave it to each viewer to decide. But that bubble is the yet-to-be-defined seniors housing area. The next piece is, what is that one? That's the existing parking garage. And the blue piece is the community center, and the green is new. There's no green space down there now, so all of the green space is new. I think it's about 3 acres. And then the 2 shades of yellow are housing, single-family homes in the lightest, and I think it's townhouses in the gold. So let's talk about what is going to be in the community center. Who knows what's in the community center? I'm thinking that Janet would know by heart better than anyone else what's in it, but let's test and see.
So it will have a double gym. It will have a 25-meter pool, and it'll also have a warm therapy pool, which is good for those that need that warm temperature, either for kids learning to swim, but also for those that may have some disabilities. It will have a programming room that can be split in 2. Is the current what we're hearing is the current design. It'll have fitness and yoga studios. It'll have a walking track, an interior walking track. It looks like above the gym. It'll have a concession kind of area where people can sit and gather. It'll have a plaza on the outside, which allows people for the drop-off and pickup, but it'll also have a plaza on the other side, which is still yet to be decided, and there's a park survey now that's going to determine sort of how all the green and the hardscape is configured. And it'll have a reception area for people. What am I missing, Peter?
I think you pretty well covered it.
I think maybe the outside green space to the north is going to be programmed in concert with the facility as well.
Right.
So you can think of it as an extension of the center.
Right.
Sounds like one of the better rec centers I've ever heard of.
It will be beautiful. It is exciting, and it will be well used, and it'll become an integral part of the community.
In one of the design presentations that we were shown, there was the notion of I don't know what to call it, a balcony, a patio, I don't know, but a bit of a outdoor space overlooking some of the green space. And that was the one I quite liked, but I don't know if that's going through in the final design or not.
So my understanding is we're going to get another glimpse or a more fulsome view of the architect's renderings sometime in January, February. He took some feedback in late October, November. He comes back to the community for more input and some fine-tuning before council then approves a final plan. Obviously, it needs to stay on budget and within budget, and so as we look at it and go, well, could we have this or could we have that? We We have to keep all that in mind. And then what ties it together, as Mark said, is this parks consultation. The green space on that map that's up there, there's lots of green space that could have contiguous trails, could have planned programming, could have passive spaces. There's a park survey out right now about how you would, what activities the residents would like to see on those green spaces. Is it more horticultural? Is it a splash pad or some kind of water feature? There's lots still to be decided, but it's all in good hands.
Okay. So I know that Council has committed to a master plan of park in the area to include Wallace, which is a fairly, well, I couldn't tell you whether it's 1 or 2 acres, but anyway, it's a chunk of park space below that area that we showed where the one public and the is it 3 private tennis courts? I mean, private. They're all they're all public in a sense that Oakville traditionally calls it. The Peter, how are people managing the wait? I mean, we've got 2 years to wait to get to this thing.
I think the people are looking forward to it ending and making good use of it in the community, no question, for a project like this, as exciting as this. So we're all looking forward to its completion and its use.
And Mark, what work do you have left to do on the rest of the site?
Well, we've just completed, as you're aware, the zoning and the official plan for the residential pieces that are going forward on the site. And just for everyone's information, we've come in at densities that would match basically the densities of the neighborhood. That was an important feature that came through our conversation with the community. So that work will be going forward. There's the, of course, the subdividing of the lands, which will be before council. And then there's site works to, as an example, in the drawing we saw a road that sort of runs from north to south and like the letter L shoots out to the east. So that road will have to be constructed. So there will be those types of things going forward. And further dialogue with the community regarding the ultimate design of the community center. It immediately abuts a heritage district, which is west of there. And so Livable Oakville would have us be mindful of the fact that any designs that are influencing the heritage district be complementary. So we'll be exploring that with the community and the Oakville Heritage Committee.
Well, that'll be interesting. A heritage look to a community center.
Well, we have a heritage feature, not only the district. I should have also reminded myself that the old high school itself has got the external part of the building has been designated under the Heritage Act. So we need to be mindful of how those designs come together.
Yeah, no, I'm not at all clear. Is it the entire hospital that's designated, or is it only the facade? Because I've heard both.
The facade of the high school, and that's the extent that I'm aware of the heritage designation. It's west. I can't remember the street. It's Reynolds. It runs north-south right there.
Yes.
Or Reynolds. So on the west side of Reynolds, immediately across the street from the former hospital, is an entire heritage district. So that proximity influences design features that would result for the community center. And then the exterior of the old high school would also have to be considered in terms of design.
So does this mean the community center is going to look like one of those? I remember it's an architect named Allen, I think, who was. There were 2 of these high schools. Anyway, it's extraneous to our topic today, but that the original high school had a very peculiar institutional Dickens almost like look, and. I know, and when some of the people who worked so hard to get it designated back in the early 90s have since come to me to say, we were wrong. And I said, we don't make mistakes.
Look, Dickinson, when we saw a quick peek at it at the parks consultation, but again, there's lots of conversation still to happen. It had lots of light. It had lots of glass. It had angles to create sort of some dimension. It was well set back from the road.
The community center.
The community center. And I think I don't know my heritage as well as you do, and obviously you do, Mark, but you don't have to match the heritage, with the community center. You just need to complement. Is that?
Yeah, I would agree. In massing, color, scale, height, those things should be complementary. They shouldn't overshadow what council is trying to achieve with its heritage designations of the other features.
As they are to the parking garage as well. There's an integration that's taking place with the new design of the community center, the parking garage itself as it stands today, and flowing down into the school. So,
Yeah, and the parking garage is a beauty. There's a design.
yeah.
They're going to try and make it a tad prettier.
So I think a lot of people are still curious about the seniors housing bubble on the drawing. And I think it could be fun to speculate about what we could do there. There's always a danger when we speculate, because somebody will hear only part of it and think, oh, that's what it's going to be. But there's so much interest in it. This is a great chance to put out some ideas. And Peter, let's start at your end of the table and come along. And have you and your board and your residents had thoughts about what kind of seniors housing you want there?
Yeah, I think it's a great opportunity, actually, that we have that we're facing right now. There's suggestions that it should be independent living, a certain component of it being along the lines of, just to use it as an example, a Barclay Square setup, where you have smaller homes that lend themselves to effectively independent living, as well as some form of assisted living. I think what's important is to think of reaching and striking a proper balance to accommodate a lot of the community that we have that are in transition, that are looking to get out of their homes. They're at that point of their lives. They're completely independent, but they would like to buy down, if I can use that term. So it's important that we think of the combined needs of the community, because not every senior is in the same situation. Some need assistance, others are perfectly independent, and they're just looking to stay in the community because they've lived there all their lives. So when we think about that particular area, we need to think about transition, facilitating transition.
So something that would be a transition to Wyndham Manor, perhaps?
Yeah.
The long-term care needs of our town, I think, are undermet. The Lynn doesn't agree with me, but we've recently had signs from Queen's Park that their minds might be shifting. I think the numbers are incontrovertible, but if they were incontrovertible, the Lynn would be agreeing with me. So if we do need hundreds more long-term care units, that could be a place for it as well. Would that be of possible interest to the community, or the transition, is that
I think it's a balance of various. I don't think we should necessarily think along the lines of fitting only one need and making it all long-term. We have to think about reaching a balance of the various needs in the community.
Okay. Janet, what about at your end of town?
Well, from the very beginning of the conversation about reimagining the hospital lands, seniors and support for seniors was part of a conversation. And I would agree with Peter that what we hear commonly is some kind of transitional seniors care. Allow me to have my independence for as long as I possibly can, and then have supportive care, and potentially longer term care. Would that be ideal? I think that would check all the boxes. On the other hand, I think we have to be open to what fits on the land, what works in terms of the design, who would administer it, how it would all come together. I think it's a good conversation that still needs to, be had, and it'll take more than a couple conversations, I'm sure.
Yeah. Mark, do you have any, can you help with these points?
I couldn't agree more with what I heard. I believe that the balance that you've described, Peter and Janet, I believe that further conversations with the community, the good news is that there's a common understanding that seniors should reside on the property. And how it comes together has to be sensitive to scale, much like the other portions of the site. They all have to contribute something that's not overwhelming in terms of the site and how it inserts itself into the neighborhood. I know that my experience was that the people I spoke to were supportive of wanting to stay in the neighborhoods they raised their families in, but maybe downsizing a little bit. But I agree with your point too. There should be some balance in terms of what the needs are, and we'll uncover those with council and the community as we go forward.
Now, there tends to be a concern from residents about ownership and operation, or operator and ownership type things. Can you help clarify any of those points?
Well, I think those remain unresolved. Ownership, and it all comes down to who's going to be paying for it, right, and what council sees in terms of its role. That's really a matter for council to decide. So there's a number of models that we would look at. If it's a private sector partner, or it's the region of Halton that might be involved. We simply don't know.
I think the concern among residents, and I'm sure that Peter or Janet would be quick to correct me if I'm wrong on this, is ultimately they want comfort about control. They want to know that what we plan will happen. And council and I tend to believe that through the power of land use authority and the power of contract, because we own it, that these things are easily looked after. And can you, on the other hand, the worry comes up all the time, so they may not believe me. Maybe you can help them believe this?
I wholeheartedly agree with your point. The council is in the decision-making role here, so as a land use authority, you have decided on density, number of units, in other words, how intense the site will work, and we have a very tight zoning on that, and it'll be our job from a planning standpoint to make sure that that goes forward. In terms of ultimate sale, council again is in the driver's seat. You can, by way of offer of purchase and sale, require the developer to meet certain outputs and outcomes that are satisfactory from a town standpoint. And again, you have the ultimate authority. So I think the community should know that as long as you're talking to council, council can hear what you have to say, and then staff can arrange those things on behalf of the community.
Yeah, I sometimes find myself reminding people, we're just fellow neighbors who've, for one reason or another, decided that it's a good way to spend your time to be on council, but we share the same concerns and we share the same desires. I know that in one alternate universe, we have a company called the Halton Community Housing Corporation, and it's responsible for various forms of, I'm going to call it assisted living, social housing, all different kinds, seniors related. There are dozens of different forms of need. And our municipality is one of those two-tier municipalities that nobody likes to think about. But some of your municipal services are delivered through Halton Region and some through the town of Oakville. And the town of Oakville has enough influence on the I mean, we're a third of the members of the council of the region of Halton. And the result is that, in my office at least, we think of Halton and Oakville as two different corporations stacked on top of each other, but we have, I have the same say in each one. I've got one vote in each one. And we've found that our neighbors in Halton are just like us, and we're all working towards a vision of a common good. The official plan of Oakville is called Livable Oakville, and the official plan of Halton is called Sustainable Halton. And P.S., I named them both. So, I think that fits together. So I think that HCHC would be a good vehicle for what we do there. But only if we, I'm sensitive to the fact that we want to maintain a sense of trust, and if we have a sense of trust about using the Halton Community Housing Corporation, then that's a good path. And if we don't have a sense of trust for that, we'll find another way. But if we don't have a sense of trust about it, we've got to ask ourselves why and fix it, because we own it. So In the rest of the plan for this thing, we have the unknown of the old Oakville Trafalgar High School and the Civic Square Plaza bit, and there's been some uncertainty expressed about those points, Mark. Possibly no one with more expression of that uncertainty than Janet here. So I don't know whether to, Janet, express the uncertainty that you feel, and in a minute or so, we'll let Mark try to answer it.
So from our board's perspective, and I think other RAs the same, what a wonderful looking, when you look at that map, you see green, you see civic space. You envision, as Mark had presented in the summer, that it's a gathering place, if you will. And the worry is, what's it going to look like? And when we hear, and we're very pleased to hear that there be some complementary design with the community center, it's what's that green space going to look like? What we don't want, to say the negative, would be another turnaround that makes it more like a parking lot. And so just having it as part of the parks consultation and having that landscape architect and the architect present some options that then the town, through contractual work, ensures that the private owner delivers on, that would be awesome. That's our worry, is that what will it be and how will it fit into the overall context of what will be an amazing transformation of the lands.
You've only got 1 minute.
So I agree with what Janet said. Janet, you spoke well at council last week, and I heard loud and clear that the community center, the park, the community center, and the civic space, as shown on the map, should be considered as one element. And the fact that it shows as green in the map, I think, provides me some certainty that that's where we're going to end up. The reality is we haven't evolved to a point where we have the specifics, but the messages that you and Peter, your group has brought forward are clear to staff, at least from my perspective, that it's one seamless integrated space. It's not a parking lot. The views to that high school need to be maintained from a heritage standpoint, so we'll ensure that that space is open. It's really for you guys to decide how you want that space to evolve.
If I may just add one perspective on this, the size of that green space has the capability of positively impacting the whole area as well as negatively impacting the whole area. One of the big attributes of that design is that the connectivity of the green space flows through all the way through to the southern part of the lands.
That's a good point to stop, and the reason it's a good point to stop is because we're out of time. But it was a good last point.
There we go.
And you got it in. Thank you very much for joining us on Oakville Matters. I hope you'll join us again.